Okay, here we are with Jeannie Buffalo on December 17th, 2009, part of the Bayfield Video Archives interviews. Thank you for sharing your stories with us, Jeannie. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm really
And
proud to be
it won't hurt.
Fairly painless.
fairly painless.
Bobby Nelson here. Say, Gene, I want to start off a little bit getting to know you and know your immediate family. And as far as we can go into the depths of your mind, get to know some of the old relatives of the past and, the people that your grandparents and their grandparents, as far back as you want to go today. But let's just start with you a little bit. Where were you born, and what was your birth date and things like that? Let's just start off there.
All right. I was born on November 24th, 1959, which actually that day was the day that landed right on Thanksgiving Day. So when my mom was in the hospital, after she had me, my dad had baked a huge turkey and brought her some. So that was a real joy of celebration for my mom and my dad, and that they had to celebrate their Thanksgiving in the hospital. But I mean and I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My father was working down in Milwaukee at Harnischweger, and he was there for 30-some years. And my mother was working on and off. She pretty much was a homemaker at first and raising us kids, and then she went to work for Junior House, which was a fabric house she worked at. So she was able to get a lot of fabric there to make our clothes at home, which was really awesome to watch her work at the same time, making our outfits and our school clothes and our winter clothes. And so she was very multitask. She did a lot of wonderful things, in terms of, well, at that time too, it was, tough times, because Dad was working and Mom was trying to raise the family at home, being the homemaker, that, she felt that it, would be a lot more better for the family to have clothes made from her. So she did. She pulled out her sewing machine and did all our clothes for the school year and the summer. And so we really didn't do a lot of shopping per se, clothes-wise, which was all right, by us, because my mom was very talented in making our clothes.
Jeannie, what year were you born?
1959.
So now we're talking in the early 60s then. You're growing
Absolutely.
up in Milwaukee. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When you say us, I know that you have some brothers and family members. Can you tell us who your immediate family is there?
I have 4 brothers and 1 sister, one sister and myself. And there's Henry Jr. There's my sister Mary. She's the oldest. Then there's Henry Jr. Then there's Richard, Joseph, then myself, and my brother Steve. So
they're all out of
that's
the Bayfield area
the
now.
makeup of our family.
Are they around here now, or are they all gone?
My brother Joseph still lives here. And the other ones live in Milwaukee, and my brother Henry lives in Minneapolis.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about what they do.
Henry, I recall when I left Bayfield High School, I graduated in 1977, but I got out early. I got out in December. And so in order for me to get out of high school, I had to pursue my education again. So I went back to Northern College. I spent a semester there. And at that time, my dad was, he was getting really sick. He was having a lot of medical problems. And so what I then chose to do is decided to go to Milwaukee to continue my education down there. And so I lived with my sister for a short while, and then I lived with my brother Henry. And at that time, my brother Henry was just in college. He was going to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, UWM, and he was getting his Bachelor's of Science degree. And so he had to make a decision as he was raising his family. He had to make a decision whether if he wanted to further his career in law school. So he did. He as he went to college, I babysat for their kids, watched their kids, and I took a couple college courses at the same time and worked part-time. So it was just a multitude of different things that I was able to accomplish while I was down there, being with my family and working with them and going to school at the same time, and raising my nephews and my nieces.
So you're about 18, 19 years old then?
Absolutely,
In that time frame, you're a pretty young girl.
Yep. Yeah. My father didn't want me to go. He begged not for me not to go for whatever reason it was. But, well, you know, and I'm going to go back a little bit further. You know, we moved up here in 72, and the lake was his life, Lake Superior. So it was like he needed a companion to go out there. So myself and my brother Steve, were always the one that he took along whenever he was making his little adventures. So we were there to help him, to, you know, be the hand decks on his boat, or drive his car if he needed us to drive, or take, you know, we would always be right by his side whenever he needed us. So we didn't mind that.
What was his name?
His name was Henry Buffalo Sr.
Okay.
Henry Martin. Yes.
And he was the son of?
He was the son of Martin Buffalo.
Martin Buffalo.
Yes. And Martin was the son of Antoine Buffalo.
Antoine Buffalo.
Yes.
And he was the son of?
Antone Buffalo.
Antoine Buffalo.
Yes. And then we get into the Chief Buffalo.
So
we go back about 4 generations.
So in Chief Buffalo?
Of chieftainship, yes. And in Redcliffe, and I remember when I first moved back to Redcliffe in 1988, I worked for the tribe for a little bit, and I started typing up elders' memoirs. And that was one of the things that I had an opportunity to type up was, I'm trying to think of his name. His last name is Basney.
Is he the fiddle player?
Yeah, I think so.
Because we interviewed him. I'm trying to remember his
Franklin?
name too.
Franklin, yes.
Frank,
yes.
yeah, that's right.
I typed to his memoirs, and that was one of the things he talked about in his story, was that in order for the chieftainship to continue on, it would always have to be the eldest son of that generation.
Oh, okay.
That carried that lineage on. So today, when we talk about our lineage and our chieftainship, Bob Buffalo, Robert Buffalo, which his dad was William Buffalo.
Which was Martin's brother?
Which was Martin's brother, oldest brother. He carried then that legacy. And so when Franklin talked about that, that's what he said, and he was very adamant about how important that was, is, you know, in terms of our traditions and our culture, was to really talk, you know, really maintain that lineage, so that it carries on.
So now in the world of the native Chippewa, the chieftain is more, the tribal chairperson runs the community.
Right.
In the old days, it was the tribal chief that ran the community. How does that carry forward as far as, you know, Bob Buffalo being chief? He'll always be the chief.
From a hereditary standpoint, yes.
Yeah, okay,
yes.
But he could also be the chief and the chairperson too, so.
Absolutely, absolutely. In 1934, we adopted our Constitution in Redcliffe, and so then what we did was we determined exactly how our rules and our regulations would set forth, and how we would nominate or how we would vote for, you know, who our leadership will be at that time. And in the past, and we go back to the chieftainship again in our hereditary cultural traditional practices, was that they also looked at their clan system, the clan system. So when we talk about those, or we look at those are the qualities of that clan system that carries that forward. So we were a part of the Loon clan, which was leadership.
Okay, that was the leadership.
Absolutely.
And there was like the Turtle Clan.
There was the Wolf Clan, there was the Turtle Clan, there was there's a Fish Clan. So there's different species of animals that represented our community.
Okay. Your father was quite a guy. If you had a chance to meet him again and talk to him, what conversation would you start off with?
Well, very interesting, because we just not too long ago had Veterans Day last month, and they were honoring at that time World War II veterans, or acknowledging them, and I was listening to that on the TV, and one of the things is I recall, and I would love to have heard more stories about my dad being a part of World War II, and that he flew a fighter bomber over Japan. That's who they were fighting in. And the only reason why I know a lot of that is hearing my dad's stories. And then when my dad passed away, William Fredenberg, he passed away in 1983.
Okay.
And then William Fredenberg wrote an awesome poem of him in his fighter plane going across Japan in Tokyo, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful poem that very inspirational about my dad in his time in World War II.
What year was your dad born, do you think?
1917.
1917.
My dad was the only male in his family. He had 4 sisters.
And they were?
Catherine Buffalo, Mercedes Buffalo, Lucille Buffalo, and I think that's it. Is that 3 or 4?
3.
3. Okay, there's one more. Delma Buffalo.
Delma.
Yes.
So there's 1 boy and 4 girls born to Martin Buffalo.
Martin and Charlotte.
And
Buffalo.
Charlotte Buffalo
Was a Charette. Charlotte
was a
Charette.
Charette.
Yes.
And where were they living at the time?
At the time, they were living in the old Brizette house, and I believe that, well, they shifted because they migrated a lot, just like we did, when we talk about our traditions and our history. My parents, when times were really tough here, they would go back to the city and work, and and maintain there, and then they'd come back up here. I spent a lot of my younger years coming up here for the whole summer, spending my summers up here until we actually permanently moved up here. So a lot of times they lived out more north on Highway 13, out by the Brizettes, and they called them bureau houses when they built these houses, and there were certain families that were put in these houses, and there's still certain houses
When
that
you
are...
say Brizette, are you talking Hank Brizette's
Hank
place?
Brizette's house, yes.
Okay.
I recall that house, and then another on, there's a, I'm just trying to think where Philip Gordon used to live on Bradham Road. There used to be a farm down there, and there was another house there, because a lot of the stories my sister talks about, because she was also raised here for a short period of time, went to the Catholic school in Redcliffe, and she recalls every time she would look down Bradham Road, she would just get the shivers, because she had to walk, probably about 3 miles from the end of Bradham Road to all the way to the school every day, and then during the winter it was even.
What year was your sister born?
Geez, I really couldn't tell you. She's I think she's about 63 or 64. So it must have been in
47.
40s, yeah, around there. Yeah, about 47, 48, yeah.
If you could just take a second and give us some insight into the Charette family, if you know too much about your grandmother's side there.
Well, my grandmother died very young, at a very young age.
And her name was?
Charlotte Charette, or Charlotte Buffalo.
Charlotte Buffalo.
Yeah, married to Martin.
Okay.
Martin, I believe, I recall seeing an article of Martin not too long ago, is that he had been chair maybe for 30 some years for the tribe. Yeah, on and off.
From 1930. Was he the original
Yes,
chairperson?
he was the original chairperson. Yes.
In 34.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's his signature's on the Constitution. He's a part of the group.
Do you remember any other names on the Constitution?
I recall some Brisettes. I recall DePerry's. I recall Gordon's. Yeah, there's quite a few different traditional names there.
Okay. The Charette family goes a long way back. The Buffalo family goes, well, I think your great-great-great-great-grandfather.
1700s, yeah.
Can you say his name in Ojibwe so I get it straight?
Bijiki.
Abijiki. And that was Chief Buffalo.
Yes, right. Bijiki means like a buffalo, an
Okay.
animal, a large animal.
Okay.
That's how it's interpreted through the Ojibwe language.
And from what I've read is he was the head chief of all Chippewa east of the Mississippi.
Correct.
That means he would call in. Tell us, maybe Jeannie, could you tell us when he would call in the other chiefs to discuss the Treaty of 1854? Can you give us a little insight to what may have happened at a traditional tribal gathering like that?
Well, when we think back then, at that time, there was really no significant territories other than the fact that we identified territories as a part of our migration in terms of where the food lies. You know, in the springtime we would go over to plant over in Bad River. They would have gardens over there. And then in the fall we would harvest our wild rice over in Bad River. We would harvest our blueberries here in this area. We would harvest our fish off of Lake Superior in this area. We would harvest our cranberries. That was another big thing too, is that my parents talked a lot about cranberry marshes on different areas of the islands.
Oh yeah.
And they would go out there and they would harvest those.
Stockton.
And so, the other thing too is real interesting, when they had the 25-year anniversary for Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, the Park Service came up to my brother Henry and said, I just wanted to let you know that this summer, this spring, if you get a chance to come up to Bayfield, get in touch with us and we will take you out to the island where we believe that we have discovered Chief Buffalo's gardens. So that's an opportunity. I think that would be really interesting for the tribe to be able to document that information and identify that as a part of their past. But anyway, getting back to how we would gather. So in the spring, and when there were times, there were commissioners that would come and set up areas here in Bayfield, in Red Cliff, for the natives to get their monthly rations. And that would either be food, or sometimes they would pay them in terms of giving up their land. That was one of the negotiations that they worked through in this treaty making process. And so Chief Buffalo worked very hard, and he was delegated to meet with the President Fillmore, and to negotiate this treaty, to talk about what areas and territories that the Ojibwe people can utilize for their abilities to hunt, fish, and gather.
Gene, there's I know, and your brother Henry's is pretty good at this too, and there was some problems prior to 1854 in the Native community and the white community here. And it had gone, like, they were pretty good friends for many, many years actually. And then what happened is that there was an incident at Little Big Sand Lake. Are you familiar with that story at all?
Sandy Lake?
Sandy Lake, yeah.
Yeah, at that time, and I recall my brother maybe historically, because Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission has really taken that to task in terms of making sure that story is a part of our legacy. And at that time, they were, again, the commissioners had told the tribal leaders and the communities that their rations would be handed out up in Minnesota, in that area where Sandy Lake is located, and that they would have to take their journey up there to get their rations, their blankets, and whatever that the government had promised that they would get. And I believe that was approximately about 250 miles that they had to travel to go that far to be able to collect, to gather their promises of that they had signed during this treaty process. So a lot of they were going back and forth on actually identifying a location, and so when they finally did, it was the Native people started migrating towards that area, and oftentimes it was in they were to get their rations in the winter time. It was very, very difficult for them to make it to Sandy Lake. So a lot of the Native people that were on this journey to get their monthly return perished on their way. So Great Lakes Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission has documented that as a part of our heritage, a part of our culture, a part of part of our legacy in terms of why it was so important for us in terms of making sure this treaty that Chief Buffalo negotiated for our people, to make sure that they are being fulfilled.
Okay, thank you very much. That's interesting.
The other thing I think is real important is that not only just Red Cliff, but the 6 Chippewa tribes here, or Ojibwe tribes here in the state of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan, identify Madeline Island as the hub of the Ojibwe Nation. So we had a lot of our ceremonies there. We've been, Madeline Island was the home of the Ojibwe nations. So they knew where to come every time it was ceremony time, and they had their Medewan ceremonies there, and they prayed, and and that's where they brought the chiefs together and talked about, in terms of what that treaty, the interpretation of what that treaty really meant, and then where those territories were led. So that's how we were able to identify in the state of Wisconsin Lakota Ray, Bad River, Lac de Flambeau, Mole Lake, or Sikagan tribe, and Red Cliff, the 6 Ojibwe tribes there. And then I want to say that as a part of our history too, the Forest County Potawatomis, and you can, when you read history books, you can go back to the Potawatomis were in our area too, and identified as a part of using the territories for hunting, fishing, and gathering purposes.
So, okay. I want to take you in a little different direction now. You're a pretty young girl, and you come back to Bayfield, and you enter the Bayfield School District. Tell me what life was like for you as a kid coming back to Bayfield schools, and tell me about your experiences in the school district of Bayfield and your friends and best friends. And I know that you were a good athlete and an excellent basketball player and all that stuff. Let's just kick around that subject a little bit.
All right. When I left Milwaukee, I was in kind of like a melting pot. So a lot of the people, the community that I lived in was Hispanic. And there wasn't any black people in our area. I mean, very rarely we ever seen in our community in Milwaukee. So I didn't really know what Indian people were. I do need to also include my mother. My mother is not Ojibwe, she's Oneida. So she's from Green Bay. And so when I was in school in Milwaukee, I was able to, in my class, I had like a melting pot of people. Hispanics and some Native people were there that were in my class, and then non-Indian people, or white people. And so I had an opportunity to meet, but I really didn't really identify my identity as a Native person when I was living in the city until I moved to Red Cliff. In 1972, my father had congestive heart failure. He was diagnosed with that, so he had to quit working and choose a different career, different environment to live in. So he took his family back up to Red Cliff again. I believe that, you know, throughout these years, my brother Richard was born here in Ashland. My brother Henry was born in Milwaukee. I was born in Milwaukee. My brother Steve was born in Milwaukee. Joe was born in Milwaukee. But my sister was born also in Milwaukee. So I think my brother Richard was the only one, as you know, they traveled back and forth, that they were, that, you know, that we had one brother that actually was born in this area. Anyway, so when I came up in 72, I was in 8th grade.
8th grader.
8th grader, yeah. And we were really happy to come here. We came in January, in the midst of winter. So we moved in, and Bayfield School District was very different to what I was acclimated to in the bigger city. And so that was kind of different, you know, not really knowing who I was, where I came from. Other than that, we would come up every summer and I would be around my relatives, and this place was always a hunting, fishing, and gathering thing for my dad. It was so important to be here. And so we moved here, and I went to school, and I met a lot of my family members, my extended family members. Didn't know hardly any of them, other than that, you know, when we'd come up in the summertime. And so that was a real whole different, you know, frame of atmosphere. And so we had some really good teachers. You know, back then it was Casper.
Boo Casper?
Yeah, Boo Casper, and John Spencer and Jim Spencer and Barb Spencer. And our English teacher was Mrs. Olson. And it was really kind of like we were a community, you know, and a lot of native kids there. So it wasn't really, I didn't feel out of place. I felt like I was, you know, in a very comfortable atmosphere, very good learning environment for me. Got along with everybody, you know. And we kid around now because it's been, you know, almost 30 years since we've graduated. And, you know, and when I think about that, you know, I think about, you know, sitting down with some of my old classmates, and we talk about, or we'll go through a yearbook and kind of reminisce a little bit about what our adventures were. And, you know, we would drive around in my car, my dad's car, and, you know, just kind of hang out in Bayfield. Bayfield was our, you know, Red Cliff, or at least I can remember, a lot of my friends would go to Bayfield to go roller skating, doing a lot of outdoor activities there. So we would either walk to Bayfield, or we'd hitchhike, get a ride from, you know, people from our community, our communities, I should say. And we would come down and, you know, go to the movie house and go roller skating. So they had a lot of wonderful activities for the kids, you know. And then we had a youth hall in Red Cliff where we would go, and then we would take time they would teach us different kind of cultural activities out there.
Who are some of your friends in high school?
Pam Barningham, David Andrews, Judy Pratt. Let's see, I'm trying to think. The Erickson girls. Let's see, Charlie Brzett. A lot of them, you know, I recall because my brothers were in school with them also, so I got to know a lot of their friends too. Colleen Kadat. Let's see, Dave Coran. Just a magnitude of different good friends.
A lot of good old buddies.
Yeah.
From the old days. How good was your basketball team in high school?
Oh my God, it was awesome.
Was it?
I started in high school I was Mr. O'Leary at that time was our basketball coach. He went the 4 years through the time that I was in high school. He was our basketball coach, so he really taught us a lot of good quality physical fitness. You know, I mean, he made us run a mile. Our team, I want to say Annie Sullivan at one time was on our team. Dolores Goki was on our team. And when those people kind of left, let's see, there was, Colleen Kinney was on our team. Walksmith, Kim Walksmith was on our team. So we had a very, and then I think her name was Anderson. I can't remember her first name though. Deb Anderson, maybe?
Dana?
Dana, yeah, Dana Anderson. But anyway, yeah, Mr. O'Leary kept us, very fit and we did very, very well in basketball. And it was really, I really enjoyed it. I did. I was always in physical ed, or I really enjoyed basketball. One of the things I didn't get into was volleyball or baseball, but basketball pretty much was my cup of tea.
Yeah,
and so was my brothers too. My brothers
they were really
very,
good athletes.
very good athletes too.
Joe was especially good. Remember that? He could jump right through the roof.
Yeah.
Just about. He really had good spring to him.
Yeah. Well, and at that time we had so many different things going on. We had cheerleaders, and we had people.
Swing choir.
Yes, swing choir was there. We had so many different activities than we do in this generation. And it was very fun. We had the band.
Mrs.
Color
Breback
guard.
Would she have the swing choir then?
The swing choir, yes.
Did you ever get into that at all?
I got into the color guard when we would march during the Apple Fest times.
I see.
Yeah, or
Marching
go
band.
different places, like to Ashland and Washburn and be in their parades and stuff like that.
So your experience if you were to give it your experience at going to Bayfield School from an A to an F, how would you? What kind of grade would you give yours?
I'd give it a B.
Yeah.
Because I really had a wonderful experience there. I wish that, and that was one of the things that there, and this needs to be shared because it's really important, is about the different cultures there. We had a good percentage of Native people that went there. And even today, I think it's at 70%.
Right.
Today when we talk about that and we see, the buses going out to Redcliffe, there's at least 4 or 5 buses that bus our children. So it's a legacy. It's a ongoing part of who our communities are, that make up our communities.
It's a greatly diversified school.
Absolutely. And so when I think about that, and we had some hardships. We went through some hardships, but for me, I didn't even look at it as being an Indian or a non-Indian. We got along together.
Who's that kid?
Yeah, right. And those are the things that I think that helped me get through a lot of the racism, as a lot of things were going on, in terms of people being treated differently, families, being treated differently. But I never really experienced a lot of that part of it. My friends may have, but I got along really well with the Barninghams and the Ericksons and the families that lived in the
Swedes and
town.
Norwegians.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't have any hardships with anybody. And that was one of the things I told Don Anderson when I was a senior in high school before I left. Was if I ever move back to Redcliffe and come back to my homelands, I said that's one of the things that I want to get back into is working with the school and trying to make it a good place and maintain the integrity there, and how important that is to kind of bridge our gaps.
So I know for a fact that you worked very, very hard to ensure that the education and the quality of education at Bayfield schools was as good as it could be. And you were on the school board for
14 years.
14 years. Tell us a little bit about that experience. And you went from everything from being a board member to the president of the board. So kind of fill us in the year you started, and if you can.
Yeah, that was quite a while back. I want to think in 80. Well, see, when I moved back, one of the things I said to myself, because I worked in the city, I raised 2 daughters there, and and met my husband. And that was one of the things that always said was if I was ever to come back, that was one of my goals were to really, see what, because I was actually raised on my father's shirt tails, I would say, because everywhere he went, I was there. I would have to drive him to his meetings, and I'd sit there and we would, his fun activities, his social activities. And and it didn't really bother me because I knew a lot of his friends, and I got along with a lot of his friends and my mom and her friends and stuff. So that was, to me, it was a learning experience because I really didn't have a lot of, didn't really hang a lot around kids my age. I was really around a lot of adults. So I would take my dad to meetings, or we'd go to Milwaukee, and I'd sit there in coastal zone meetings with him when he was on the tribal council, and on his a lot of his big activities, participating in tribal government issues. So there, when I look at that, I think back in terms of what it is when I came back here, and that was, like I said, was one of the things I said to Don Anderson was, when I come back, I'll be an active parent, and I will be a part of this Board of Education. That's going to be one of my goals when I come back. And sure enough, back in, I want to say 92, I got on the Indian Education Committee in 89. And so then we had some really good communication between the school district and the tribe, and there were some challenges there too, but we are always able to work those things through. And so since then, I sat on that board and we worked very hard, and not knowing what my responsibilities as a board member was, but I had my colleagues there to help me and guide me through that process and get to understand in terms of budgets and understand state laws and how important education needs to be for us.
It's and that was real necessary because there is a difference, or that you have to consider, is that there's tribal autonomy and state laws, and to balance all that stuff and make a public school in Wisconsin work is quite a challenge. Did you ever have any challenges that you just got some gray hairs over on that board?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because you're there representing a very large community. You're talking close to 2,000 people in that community, whether they live on reservation or off reservation. Indian issues are Indian issues, Native issues. So, when you talk about that representation that you bear, you carry with you in terms of that in terms of our community, that there had been some real strong challenges there, and we were able to always address those issues and try to work through them.
Come through them alive.
Yeah. Absolutely. That was so important for us because of our community, And I look at our community as from Madeline Island, the city of Bayfield, the town of Bayfield, and the Red Cliff community.
You were on the board all those years, but prior to that, you decided that you mentioned that you got together and got married and had a family. Can you tell us a little bit about who your immediate family members are? Tell us a little bit about that.
I have
you have 3 daughters.
Yeah, I have 3 beautiful daughters, Selena, Edwina, and Sonia. Selena's my oldest. She started school here in 3rd grade, and Edwina started school in kindergarten here. And so actually the 2 youngest were K through 12. They had the whole Bayfield experience.
What years were they born?
Selena was born in 79, Edwina was born in 83, and Sonia was born in 1990. Okay. So when you talk about generations, we've got some generations there. But when I think back, and it's kind of interesting when I think back now to being a mother and raising my kids, and now I'm sitting back watching my children raise their children. And I'm thinking about the struggles that I went through and the struggles that my children are going through raising their families. And I think back of how we have to look at that as a part of, that being that parent and giving them those qualities, in terms of raising their children, the qualities of life, I would say, and being able to share the struggles that I had went through during, at their age, with their families and everything. So that was really an interesting part of me when I think about, sitting back and now watching my grandchildren and watching my daughters and how they discipline and how they interact with their children and how they participate in activities at school and in their communities. And so, I wanted them to make sure that they had a variety of that and that they weren't isolated from anything. I wanted them to participate and be a part of that and to understand about those challenges that are out there in this world, And even though our communities are small and very close, and that they have to come up with solutions, they have to come up with choices. And that was one of the things that I really always pursued on them was, when you're out there and you're doing your thing with your friends, just remember the choices that you make, good or bad. Those choices are going to come back to you, and there will be consequences. You'll get good consequences or bad consequences, but that's based on what your choices are. And that was really important that I instilled that in them, to think about other people and where they came from, and that it's important to understand their traditions and their culture and their religions and to respect them very highly, because we are very important. Our heritage is very important, and we would expect that from other people. So I would expect that from you also.
They, can you tell us the names of your daughters and their daughters and children's names?
My oldest daughter is Selena, and she has 4 children. She's just turned 30. And she has 4 children. She's got 2 boys and 2 girls. Quincy being the oldest, he's 8. He's 9, I'm sorry. Quincy's 10. It's like names, when we go through this process. Quincy's 10, Melena's 8, Richard's 2, and Stella is 6 months.
Okay.
And then I have my daughter Edwina, which she graduated from Bayfield High School, and she's got a son, Madison, and he's 8, and she's got a daughter, Gijagokwe, and she is 3.
Gijagokwe means what?
Cedar woman.
Cedar
in
woman.
Ojibwe, yes.
Good. Do any of the other children have native names?
Yes, they do, but I don't remember them in terms of the language part of it, because when we did naming ceremony, my 2 oldest daughters got their name. My youngest daughter didn't, so that's going to be something in the future that I need to seek out, is to get her name.
What is your name in Chippewa? Can that be shared or?
My Dolores gave me my name, so my name was Migasi.
Migasi.
Ikwe, yeah.
Migasi
Eagle
Ikwe.
woman.
Eagle woman. Okay, beautiful.
Yeah. Dolores Bainbridge was our language culture teacher. She spent many, many years up at the school, and I recall at one time my mother actually worked up there they did the historical part where they had a lot of information. They went through the archives and pulled out a lot of native information from the newspapers and the magazines and the books. So they were gathering a lot of good, really wonderful information. I'm not quite sure where that went. Probably in the library, I would assume. Yeah. And maybe in the library up at the school in their archives. But there was my mom, Ruth Buffalo, Dolores Bainbridge, and Defoe.
Gina?
Gina Defoe. Those are the 3 women and Grandma Tiny Cadat. Those were the 4 women that worked up at the school at the time, gathering historical information on our communities.
I'd love to see that. Well, now you have some beautiful family and things like that. We also know that you spent a great deal of your time in the trenches out in Red Cliff, in the tribal chair and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit about the politics in tribal politics and how many years you spent in as chairperson and those type of things. Update
Working
us.
for my community.
Yeah, working for your community.
In 1990, I was hired by the tribe to work in the juvenile justice program. And what we did was we worked on developing or putting together programs for our youth. And if we were to ever get a court system, which at that time was just developing. It was developing. Actually, when my father was still alive, he was a judge, and he heard some cases. We had some codes, tribal codes, laws on our books at that time. So our court system was just getting established. I want to say in the early 70s or mid 70s. And so in 1990, I worked for the tribe, and they actually had received a grant from the Department of Justice. And as a part of that grant, the tribe was to select 5 individuals of our community to go through training, judge training. And so I participated in that process. I mean, it wasn't a job per se, but it was a part of if this is what you would like to, develop more in terms of in your community. We got this grant so that we can get appellate court. We can get an appellate court system established, and we can create our own judicial system. So we went through a year and a half of training, judicial training.
Who was with you on that little?
There was Andrew Golke, and actually he started way before we did. This other group did. There was myself, Rob Goslin, let's see, Floyd Hipsher, Marion Gurno, let's see, who else was there? Harriet Balber, let's see, who else? Bob Buffalo.
Was John Daly with you then too?
He was during my dad's time.
Okay.
So him and John Daly were the actual current judges at that time.
I remember that.
Yeah. So, and they at that time were handling domestic cases like Indian child welfare cases, and I want to say probably underage drinking, or dog ordinances, just
You were
really,
just building the programs
just
up.
building our programs up. And so at that time, so the word got out in the community if anybody was wanting to be interested in wanting to work in this field. So that's how we started. We went for a full year of training, got through the training.
Where'd you go for the training?
We went through the training where they contracted with 3 judges, one from Bad River, one from Michigan, and one from Mole Lake. No, not Mole Lake. St. Croix.
Okay.
So we had Candy, Dave Siegler, I want to say Dave Ujak was a part of our group, is our kind of like our mentors. Let's see, Candy, I can't think of her last name, but she was from Michigan. She worked with the Michigan tribes. Dave Siegler, and what would the attorneys there that worked, these were tribal attorneys actually that worked for the different tribes in the Wisconsin, or I want to say tri-state region, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Milt Rosenberg was another mentor of ours. And what
was the name of the woman, tribal lawyer before Dave Ujak? Do you remember that?
No, I don't think I was in this area at the time.
Okay.
She was, whoever it
She was when
was,
your
when my dad was on the bench
Yeah.
at the time. Yeah, I'm not really quite sure.
Okay.
May have been a Gurno, Don Gurno's wife. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. Anyway, so then whoever wanted to continue on had an opportunity to, and they got another grant funded. So what we were able to then was the council established codes and ordinances. And so right now, today, I believe we have at least 50 ordinances in our books. Anywhere from hunting, fishing, and gathering issues on and off reservation to domestic, being Indian child welfare, divorces, custody issues, just a variety.
Traffic tickets and
traffic tickets, housing. We don't have criminal jurisdiction. We have civil jurisdiction.
Okay.
So, and that's an important thing that really people really need to understand what sovereignty truly is. And why we believe, when we talk about having sovereignty, having our sovereign nations, is that we have the ability to regulate within our own community. And that's what sovereignty truly is unique to our communities. That gives us the ability under the federal laws to be able to create our own laws, to be able to administer our own laws, to be able to have law enforcement to enforce those laws. And when we look at that, a lot of that fell under federal levels of laws. And so, we talk, and that was real extensive for when we went through training for us to understand those federal laws and see how we fell under those federal laws.
Yeah. So you became a judge?
I was a judge. I'm still currently a judge. I've been a judge. I was sworn in 1992 as a associate judge. And then in 1990, I want to say 95, I then became the chief judge. And I carried that for 8 years. And then in 1999, I was influenced by our community to run for tribal chair. And so the judicial system needed to continue, and I think what's really important as a part of this discussion is that I not only worked just for the community, but I also worked for the state of Wisconsin. And when we talk about local, state, and then we talk about national, those are 3 levels that we work through. We got to know the state judicial system. We got to work very closely with the Chief Justice for the state of Wisconsin. And then at the national level, where we worked very closely in terms of training for our tribal judges, and then we were able to establish a Tribal Justice Act. During the Clinton administration, we got the Bureau to fund the Tribal Justice Act, so that there were monies at the federal level put aside for tribal nations that had tribal court development, so that tribes can then continue to grow and develop their tribal courts. And again, that's demonstrating our sovereignty. That's what sovereignty truly means, is the ability to regulate within your own authority. When we look at that as a part of our sovereign.
When you, in 1999, when you decided to run for tribal chair, did you have to jump out of your judge person's shoes and go into a different mode for a while? Did you have to abandon being
Absolutely.
a judge? Yeah.
But what really taught me through this process in terms of tribal government was working with the state and the national and the federal level, understanding, because every governmental part or every governmental system had a unique process. And so when we talk about, fighting for that judicial act, getting it in place, and then we become recognized from a state level and a national level, and then we go national level, and then what we do is we help the judicial system, the governmental judicial system, understand our people, understand our communities, understand why it's important, about why we need to protect, certain parts of our traditions, like hunting, fishing, and gathering, how important that was, and those legacies that we had to go process through, not only today, but with our forefathers that fought very hard when they signed those treaties. And when those treaties were signed, there were language issues. There were language barriers. And so when I think about language barriers, and that's one of the things that was so important to me in terms of tribal government, was that today it's no longer a language barrier. Back then it was, because we didn't understand what it is that the government wanted to negotiate. But what was important for us today is that we no longer have a barrier there, and that we want to work with those agencies from a state level and a national level, so that they understand what our traditions and what's important to us in terms of what those treaties were there, and what they were signed for, and how important those treaties were, and why we need to continue to engage in those kinds of dialects and discussions, and talking to those different levels of government. So when I got into tribal government, that was it mentored me through that process when I went through the tribal judicial system, because I sat on the state judiciary, I sat on the national judiciary, I was on committees there, and I got to know a lot of
That was just prior to 1999 then.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I got to know Shirley Abramson as our chief, and then I got to know on the national level the National Tribal Judges Association, and what was important in terms of getting that tribal act implemented in our communities.
So who'd you run against for the tribal chair?
George Nuwago.
How'd you do?
I did extremely well. And I thought, okay, when I think back and through the time, and the going through back, understanding, and when I go back and I read Indian law, and I think back about sitting there and through treaty negotiations, and again, I talk about language as a part of that barrier. I think back to my ancestry, my forefathers, and the times that when they were sitting there trying to understand what they were negotiating. And I bring myself into that level of what it was in terms of trust, because that was the bottom line. The Native people felt that was so important, is to be able to trust one another when these treaties were signed, and to understand that. And so interpretation became a part of that. And so that's why I said that was a barrier back then. And so I'm thinking, when we sit there and we have to analyze laws, and we have to analyze the process, I have to go back to the time when our forefathers sat there and negotiated this process, and what it was that they needed to try to imply to the non-Indian people is, our right to hunt, fish, and gather, which is very important to us as a part of our community. And that if we give up our territory, that we want to still retain that right as a part of who we are in terms of our community, in terms of our sovereignty, in terms of our ability as a tribal community, sustaining sovereignty.
Who was on your first tribal council? Do you remember that vividly, or?
I want to think Larry Derrigan was on there, Mark Duffy, Dolores Golke Rindle, Lynn Basney, Philip Gordon, let's see who else, Jim Derrigan, who else? It's kind of pretty much of I can remember. I think Charlie Brissett also was then started on.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but were you the first female native?
No.
Okay.
I want to say the first female either on the council or as chairperson.
Tribal chair.
I want to think it was Elizabeth, or not Elizabeth, Toddy Goki.
Toddy was chair.
Yeah, I believe she was. I'm not, don't quote me on that,
Yeah.
but I believe that, or she was on the council.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe,
I had it in my head that you were the first tribal female.
No, Rose was before me.
Oh, she was?
Yes,
Okay.
Rose was before
Rose
me.
Colonel.
Yeah.
She followed in the footsteps of Dick then?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she was on the council way prior to me being here, living in this community, and me being on the council.
So you're on that, you were chairperson for how
I was chairperson from 1999 to 2001. During that 2-year stint, worked very hard with the state level, worked very hard at the national level, and there's so many different issues, you know, but you have to identify within your community those priorities of those issues. So, and went through some real hardships at that time too, because the tribe was going through some turmoil.
Tribal politics is tricky too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not any different than what our federal government is. And that's kind of, you know, what makes our community very unique is that we were able to adopt our Constitution in a format that was important to us as a process. As I talked about our lineage, you know, and our heirship, and how our heirship, you know, in terms of we had to change that once we adopted our Constitution. And that then there were people that were elected into that process in terms of making decisions on behalf of our community as a part of our Constitution in our government. And I think we only changed our Constitution one time, and that was in 1990.
You can amend it by...
Constitutional
So
vote.
that you
Yeah,
have to bring that to the whole tribal
to the
community.
whole tribe, absolutely.
Kind of like a referendum.
Referendum, yeah,
type.
absolutely.
Interesting. So you're now through 2001 and then...
During that time, as in tribal government, we were going through a trend, a changing process. And I believe Clinton's administration, Democratic administration, was during my administration. There were a couple things that I felt, and of course, that gave, my father gave me that gift as I was growing up. And when I said I was raised on his shirt tails, that sitting there and listening to the council meetings and my dad's involvement in natural resources and how important that was in terms of protecting our natural resources, and why he chose to become a tribal judge, and making and building the future of our community, our next 7 generations. And that was real important to me because, you know, as I sat back as a kid and I think about that time, you know, and my dad was grooming me as Dick was grooming Rose to continue on this legacy, you know, as far as leadership goes. During those 2 years, it was I continued that important issue in terms of natural resources. So what I was able to do as tribal chair during Clinton's administration, they were working on sustainability, looking at for the future, where are we going to be in the future? So what I was able to do during my administration was create a commission or a committee called the Wisconsin Tribal Conservation Advisory Council through the Department of Agriculture under the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS. And in there, what we were able to do was bring the chief to our community. We brought him here for 3 days. We talked about how important it is for tribes to have input, to be at the table talking about our issues in terms of our territories, you know, our natural resources, how important it is for us to access programs, federal programs, and working with the state and the federal government. So I formulated this group, this council, which brought all the tribes in the state of Wisconsin, the 11 tribes together. And what we would do is we would sit at the table in all the agencies of USDA, in which they have 22 agencies, and then they have subsidiaries under them, or they call them sister programs. And what we wanted them to do was be able to have them sit at our table to talk for them to listen to about our issues, our tribal issues. And what through that council, and that council still sits before us today, very active and involved in our state, in our national level. I've gotten like 5 awards as a leader, as a part of leadership there, bringing this consortium together to talk about Menominee issues, to talk about Ho-Chunk issues, to talk about Ojibwe issues, to talk about Menominee and Forest County Potawatomi issues. And we were able to bring all that together and identify what's important in terms of our planning for our future, our next 7 generations. So we talked about those, and we implemented, and we were able to identify and assess our natural resources. And that's really important because at that time, we never really had an opportunity to assess our natural resources and identify our priorities within those natural resources on what it is that we need to do. You know, we need to look at agriculture as a part of, you know, our history, our culture, our traditions. We look at working with the various communities. We talked about those and how we can come together. We've been able to change some of the state practices, and not only we have been able to change them, but we also were able to include tribal practices, and how important our tribal practices were able to come together with the state practices. So as we worked with the chief, Pearlie Reed at that time,
That was the
chief,
Department of...
Natural Resource Conservation Service, and
Okay.
it was NRCS at that time. And Pat Leavenworth, which is our state conservationist here for the state of Wisconsin. I met her through, you know, this whole process. And I think that's important because when you engage yourself into tribal government, you need, that's something that's so important, is that you need to understand tribal, state, and federal. Because those are the 3 tiers that work closely with our communities, and how to bring them together. And that was one of the things I think really is truly important, is for people to understand, is that coordination, collaboration, and communication were very at the top of my priority list when we talk about tribal issues. Bringing Native people to the table to talk about those issues. The Bureau is no longer there anymore to make those decisions on our behalf. We need to step forward now as a tribal government and be at those tables when we're talking about how they impact us as people.
Well, you were a busy woman.
Very busy. And then during that time, not only that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
At the same time?
At the same time.
Why?
And that was a big challenge in my life. And, you know, I just stuck through it. I went on my chemos on the weekends and was at work that Monday and just polished myself through it. I think I was maybe off 1 month, so because I had to have surgery and then I had to heal. So I think I was off 1 month of my tenure as tribal chair.
And you had the 3 girls.
And then I had the 3 girls.
Yeah.
Raising my family at the same time and being on the board at the same time, and other committees too also, and at the state level and the national level, because I was on the tribal justice level, on the national level, and the state level. So I worked very closely with Shirley and her group, and then Shirley Abeson, and then at the national level too.
Well, you've got a book that somebody could easily write about you, and probably one with you could probably do 3 books on what you've done so far.
When I look at it from a legacy part, yes, from my forefathers. And I think about that as a part, that's a gift. To me, that's a gift to me. There's a purpose for me to be here today, for my parents to have me, to bring me into this world. There was a purpose for that.
What's your next book? Tell us what the 4th book is there, sister.
Well, going
Where are you
through,
going to be in, what do you got cooking?
every day. Every day is a new day, and I have to take it every day as one day because I've now gone through breast cancer, liver cancer, brain cancer, and I have bone cancer. And I think that, if anything, is probably going to impact me more because I've beat all the rest.
Yep.
I am a survivor. I'm a cancer survivor. I've beaten the rest of the cancers. And so when I think about that, and then not only that, being a spokesperson, going through what I have gone through, and the challenges I had to go through, and the challenges I still go through today, as a survivor, and a woman, and as a native woman, as a leader.
Take 2 seconds here, would you? That's getting emotional for me. So. Dear Christ, God, I love you. You got me crying over it. Where would you advise we head?
Well, I think we've pretty much hit everything, in terms of my levels or my senses of where I was and where I came here today, as part of growing up and being a part of this community, and my sense of my purpose. My father had brought me here, and it wasn't forced upon me. It was just an everyday part of life, respecting our, every living thing, and being able to work with our communities, my dad, he just gave me so many tools, so many learning tools, so many things that, I cherish.
Yeah, he was a very patient man. I had lots of nice conversations with him in the past, and your mother Ruth too. I deeply admire him and respect him, and I'm sure that all those great qualities he had, just you were the shirt tails that you wore. So.
Yeah, and and I think about my brother Henry, and he's, his dominance, and how important that is, what he does today in working with the tribal nations, in terms of.
What is he doing?
He's an attorney, a tribal attorney, or no, I'm sorry, he has his own law firm. So he works with tribal. Yeah, he works with tribal nations exclusively. So, I think about that and how important it is, because he's the one that goes to the national level. He's the one that helps them write those laws. He's the one that engages in those discussions. Not only just the leadership, but he's a part of that, that
building
approach.
The future.
Absolutely. He was also the director of the Great Lakes when it first was set forth.
When you say Great Lakes, you're talking
Indian Fish and Wildlife, Gliffwick.
Right.
Yeah, he was the director at that time when they
Jim Schlender and that bunch.
Yeah, Henry was the founder of the Gliffwick because of the treaty issue, or the fishing issue in the Voight
Bruno
decision.
versus state of Wisconsin.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that he was a pretty young man then. Okay.
So.
Well, when you said you spent 2 years as tribal chair.
Right.
And then after that?
After that, I spent another 4 years on the tribal council.
And how often do they get elected?
The chair and the vice chair is a 2-year tenure, and that's every other year. See, there's a group. Let's see, there's the chair, and the treasury, and then the secretary, and then the at large. And then the other group, the other 2 years, is the vice chair and the treasurer.
Okay.
So it's 2 and then 3. I think when you talk about
staggered starts there.
right, staggered starts.
And what about the council members?
The at-large seats I believe there's no longer any 1-year seats. They're all 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you stayed on the school board though after that
Absolutely.
as well.
As still being tribal chair.
Yeah.
I was just a school board member at the time, and and that was a challenge for me, and because I wanted to continue having my participation on the education component. It was really important to me, and being a leader at that of our community, so that we were able to, work through some of those barriers that we had, issues or concerns, or looking at those kinds of things that at least I had firsthand knowledge.
Well, as I remember right, the year that you left, you were the chairperson of the Board of Education. Then you became pretty ill that
Right.
during that period of time. But there was a lot of stress then too,
Right.
with the moving on of the superintendent. You had to actually physically go to school every day.
Every day. That was another responsibility. And I take that responsibility 150%, as a part of what we got to get this stuff done. We've got to be there. We've got to give our staff the support. That's important. When we make that commitment, that's very important,
The school board was one of the highlights of your life. I'm sure that
Absolutely.
the education of all children.
And when I think about it, it stemmed back from the time that I was still in high school. And that was one of the things that I said to myself. I made that commitment to myself that if I were to ever move back here, that was going to be my priority, was education.
The loyalty runs deep, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And pride.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
everything that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
Jane, did you go on to school after high school then?
Yes, I went to college. I did not complete college. I was taking courses here and there. So I really, and that is another big thing, is we would always get into big controversies about that you had to be a lawyer in order for you to be a judge. And, I believe that it takes a lot of knowledge. It takes a lot of tenure. It takes a lot of time and ability to make those decisions.
Throw in the word common sense too.
And common sense, absolutely. Common sense is the big factor in there. So those are a lot of challenges as a tribal judge, because they're like, well, how come you don't have you're not an attorney? Well, there's a lot of judges that are non-attorney practicing, in the system, the judicial system. So that's something that, was really important as a part of, and makes our community, our judicial system unique, is that, it's important to get the educational component in there and the common sense, and to combine that as a part of it, and our traditions and our culture.
How did you deal with the naysayers there that said, oh, because you aren't a lawyer, we don't feel that you're adequate for the position?
We had some challenges there, even at the national level.
Yeah.
And,
How did you deal with them?
We sat down, we talked about that. We talked about that. It's not, we felt that we are very competent people, and, that we could make decisions as anybody else could, in terms of,
Read the statute as well as anybody
absolutely,
else.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You've seen a lot of changes at Red Cliff, just like we have too in Bayfield. Could you talk a little bit about those changes from the time you were a girl when you came back here, and what you're seeing in the last 10, 20 years?
The changes from a economical standpoint, our community still goes through a lot of the challenges there, even as a leader too, thinking back of, what it is that we have to do to get the families to, focus on the community as a whole rather than individual, family people. And I think back then, and I think back as a young girl watching my dad go through a lot of the trials and tribulations of tribal politics and the challenges that he was facing, and not really truly, totally understanding it as a young girl. But then it seemed like kind of made sense to me as I got older, and when I came back to this community, it made a lot of sense to me that what the challenges that he went through, and the obstacles and the agencies from a federal level. You know, you got HUD, you got USDA, you've got all these other the Department of Interior, you've got all these agencies that you have to and not only your community, but the federal government has to come to work together with. And I think about that and the trend and the changes. You know, at that time, my father, he was in the housing. I mean, he was in various levels of tribal government. He worked on housing issues. He worked on natural resource issues. He worked on the judicial issues. So to me, it was just a whole definitive process of tribal government that you had an array of. You know, why reestablish? Why reinvent? Why, you know, when we have these different agencies, we can just, you know, continue to operate these agencies as we should. You know, the various housing and economic development, and, you know, thinking about that. And when I think about economic development,
things like the early childhood learning centers,
education,
and
absolutely.
I think that's come a long ways.
It
at
has,
least some ways.
yes,
I'll be
absolutely.
careful what I say there. You know more about that than I do.
Absolutely.
How do you think the education levels at the tribal level are coming down?
I believe that we've come to a point now where we have to look at it differently now, you know, in terms of this generation, because it's just, you know, back then, education was really a very important key, and, you know, and it was important for all of us to graduate and get through the system and then move on and establish our careers, our future, our, you know, our dream. But at this point, it seems to me it's come to like a standstill because it's such a challenge now. You know, we have such a higher rate of population. You know, we have more people that come back home because it's, you know, just not there. The economics aren't there anymore. So it becomes more of a challenge from a tribal government perspective. You know, you have to go out and really politic, you know, in terms of making sure that your community is, you know, is getting those services from, you know, the national level. And making sure that, you know, those policies that have been put in place can our community can work, you know, and establish them.
Are they? Do you think that the Native people right now are better off than they were 30 years ago when you were a young daughter or a young girl under the watchful eye of old Henry Sr.? Are they better off now than when you were a kid?
No. You know, I think back then it was so laid back, so calm, it was just, you know, we did what we needed to do to take care of the people in our community. We had community gardens. No one ever went without food. We took care of one another. We looked after one another. You know, that's why it was important, you know, for extended family members to come in if mom and dad couldn't take care of the kids, you know, rather than put them in an adoption. You know, and today, you know, this, you know, the generations and the future generations, it's going to just become far more challenging for them because of how economics have changed. You know, our health system, our health in general. You know, geez, your dad, my dad, you know, the challenges they faced, but we were able to, you know, we were able to take care of one another. And today it's become more complicated. It's become far more complicated and more challenging.
Complicated.
Yeah, for the future generations. And now that, I think about my health and what I'm going through right now and the challenges, and seeing my dad and his health and what he's gone through, I think about that I need to grasp more of my traditions.
Mm-hmm.
I need to think about more holistic things. I need to, bring that back into my family so that it doesn't get lost.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important. The language, just that whole sense of holistic. Your spirituality, your yourself, just who you are. That's so important. We've kind of lost our senses there of who we are and where we came from and what that's all about, and that's become a big challenge.
If you were the tribal chairperson again, how would you retool the ship there and bring those goals back?
I would really look at, in terms of if I look at the tribal government and where they stand right now, and it's really a challenge. It really is. I'm kind of baffled by it right now, in terms of what it is that I could, because you have so many priorities,
Right.
healthcare and education and government, just government issues, relationships, maintaining those relationships.
We've this is Jeannie's show here, but one of the interesting things in the school board, which I served with Jeannie for 5 years, I believe, or 6 years, is that right now we've engaged the tribal council and the school district at the highest levels and kind of circumvented the education committee right now so that we get down and get to business, so we talk to one another and identify these problems, and then we get action. We're starting to build a 5-year SAMHSA plan there.
Good.
So that
Great.
we can actually follow up on things and it doesn't get lost in limbo. So I think I'm just telling you that for your own fun here, but I think it'll work out fairly well in the future.
And and as a part of, that all those things, when you talk about the home, the school, and the community, those are the three main aspects of, living in this world, is that when you look at it is, and that's why I think it's so important when we talk about, as from having that vision, having, what I have to do to try to manage and balance that, and work through that process in terms of as a tribal leader that might have a vision, a future for our next 7 generations. And that's why I think, as a part of mind, spirit, and body, bringing back that sense, because we lost that whole process of who we are, what we're doing, and, not really paying attention, but paying attention to everything else and not ourselves.
I don't know if I'd want to be a teenager at this time.
I mean, either.
Isn't this a tough time for kids?
It is an extremely tough time.
You haven't seen anything yet.
No.
You can watch what they're going to get into in the near future.
Oh, I can just imagine.
Even in small communities like this, you think of problems in the urban areas, but in the
Right.
small communities everywhere now, it's, there's so much, they're just bombarded by so much.
So many things,
You
so
know,
many different
It's
things.
hard to keep their equilibrium, I think.
Yep.
It used to be we'd walk to school with our books in the morning. Now kids are driving to school and they're going all over the place. They have access to everything. The computers have taken them away from the soccer
Technology,
fields.
absolutely.
And the health and the walks in the woods and the holistic approach. It's
It's
a
not there.
different
Yeah, it's
generation.
a whole different generation.
The iPod generation is going to be in trouble, I think. And there's so many of them. That's the problem.
Right. And I was at my grandkids' little Christmas music, and I was sitting there looking at, my grandkids and their playmates and their friends, and I just couldn't imagine. I mean, to me, it's like they're going to have a challenge in their life.
But I'll give you some hope here, because I remember my grandmother Nelson telling my dad, that it was pretty much the end of the world coming now because of the way things are going in this country. And it seems like all generations seem to pull out of it. And even though we look down the road, there's some beautiful kids and some great opportunities coming. So
Absolutely.
I'll leave it on that positive note that times are going to be okay. But.
I think one of the key thing is that we continue to, take ourselves and put ourselves, set ourselves aside and think about what's going on. Take that time to really think about it, and before we make those decisions, because of the impact. Like I talked about choices, the consequences of those choices that we make, if we allow it or not allow it, and what the impact it's going to have for the future generations. If we look at like wild rice production, and that's a big thing right now for all the tribes here in the state of Wisconsin, is the ability to bring back our native foods, and USDA looks at it as that a specialty food. They don't look at that as a commodity. They identify our foods as a specialty food. So it was really a challenge for us as tribal nations to engage in bringing in those types of programs, because they didn't have the appeal of what is important to us as Indian people. Looking at balancing, respecting one another, looking at our nutrition and how important that is, and our elders, and going back to more simplistic things in life, rather than like we talked about the technology.
The maple syruping is important, and all those aspects of traditional
our
lifestyle.
language and our history and our traditions.
You can't begin to lose it.
Absolutely not.
The tribal people and the people and the non-tribal people are all governed by one adage. It's called "We the People," and all the decisions are made through the people out there. And you just hopefully they'll select the highest quality people that they can put into office and the most qualified, and seek their prayers, that they're governed well.
Absolutely.
Jenny, could we go back just a little bit to your father and mother? I know that they're very important influences. Now, how did they make a living? And could you just go through your father and then through your mother? You haven't talked much about your mother.
Yeah. And it always seems to be that way, but we hold her with great importance just as much. Even though her identity as an Oneida tribal member is not, we respect that very much in our family, but we always don't engage in that very often. My mother was born during the Depression days, and my grandmother raised 16 children in the city. So my mom not only was the third oldest, but she also had to help my grandmother as she was raising her siblings, or her brothers and sisters.
What was her maiden name again?
Steffes.
Steffes.
And so.
And her first name?
Ruth.
Ruth.
Right. So I think back of the stories.
You said the city, is that Milwaukee?
Milwaukee, yeah. Because we came from this area, my mother came from Green Bay area, and so when my dad was in the armed forces, in the Air Force, that was kind of like where they met, was in Milwaukee, because that's where they were stationed. My mother.
Mitchell Field there? Or?
Right. My mother was at that time helping my grandmother raise her brothers and her sisters, and I remember my mom saying, we are always sent to the butchers to get the bones. My grandma would make a wonderful soup out of it. Or my mom actually helped bring into the world a set of twins, and then another sister after that. Because as my mother was having children, my grandmother was still having children. So so when you think about that, that's incredible, and then to be able to go back and forth. And so when I think about that, and my dad, And I know that was one of the things that they talked a lot about was when my grandmother died, and I never knew what she looked like. I'd never met her, and I believe my sister don't even remember that either.
Was your grandmother native?
Charlotte,
Yeah.
she was a charette
Okay, gotcha.
on my dad's side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and my mother's full-blooded Oneida. My
Oh, she
grandmother
is?
was. Yeah, she
How
could
did you
speak
get
the
the name
language.
Stephus out of that?
I don't know. I'm not sure, but my brother Henry just went to a family reunion, and they had 300 people.
Huh.
So my grandmother's maiden name was Elm. That was her maiden name.
Elm.
Elm, yes. So that was
E-L-M.
ELM. That was a big family, and there's elms in the state of New York, also. So you know she's that whole.
Well, that was a
lineage
part
there.
of the Oneida migration
Right.
was from New York, upstate New York.
Right. So anyway,
Were
when
they
I-
part of the Algonquin Nation then?
Yes.
So the Oneida and the Ojibwe are part of one great.
No.
Okay, break that down for me a little bit, would you?
The Oneida is a part of the Iroquois Nation.
Okay.
The Ojibwe is a part of the Algonquin
Okay.
Nation. That's Iroquois and Algonquin are two different nations of nations.
Of which there are the Chippewa, the Huron, the Miami, not the Lakota.
No,
That's a different nation
It's a whole
altogether.
different nation altogether.
Okay, gotcha. The Miami. Yeah.
So after your father came back from the war, what did he do?
My mother and father met in the city, and they married and had my sister, and I want to think my brother Henry was. I want to think he was born in the city too. And then they would, like I said, they would move up here, and then my grandmother died, Charlotte Charette, or Charlotte Buffalo. And so then they would come up here every year to make sure Martin was taken care of and his needs, you know, and whatnot, and visit. And so then a few times I remember my mom would tell us that they would take my grandpa Martin to the city, and he'd stay there for the winter months because it was pretty desolate here, and you know, and he wanted to get out of the area, you know, and just be part of their life. So he would go down to the city and live with my mom and my dad for the winter months, and then bring them back in the summer months, and then they would do agriculture.
Well, your dad was a union welder or something too, though, wasn't he? Didn't tell us a little bit about who he worked for down there.
Harnish figure, he built cranes.
Okay.
Yeah, he worked
Oh.
on cranes and heavy equipment.
Okay.
He worked in that kind of field.
Okay.
He was like the manager, the office, or the what would you call
Plant
that?
manager.
Plant manager. There you go.
Okay.
So he had a good job there.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was a setback to come north then.
Yes.
So when he came back here then for good, what did he do here then?
He dove right into politics, tribal government. Yeah.
How old was he? He was born in 17 and he came here in 72. He
was in his, I want to say, late 50s, and yeah, he was in his late 50s because his health was deteriorating then, and then he had kidney. He lost his kidneys, and he was on dialysis, and that's another big thing too, is that we didn't have a dialysis center here, so they would have to drive him every 3 times a week up to Duluth to have his treatment. And so then what they did was the Kidney Foundation said, we will train your mother, your wife, so that you wouldn't have to travel so far. We'll get a machine put in your home, and that your wife can then become the nurse. She got like 6 weeks training on how to put the needles in, and you know, and do what she needed to do to keep him alive.
Yeah. Well,
Where's your mom? Tell us a little bit about your mom's present status then.
My mom just had a birthday last month, November. She turned 85. And she currently right now is in a nursing home. She was getting dementia. She was losing track of where she was at and what she was doing. And so that was becoming a real hardship for us because, not only were we raising our children, but we also were taking care of our parents. So that it was a really big challenge for us.
I just lost my mother, and a little while ago. But one of the great opportunities I had down there at Northern Lights in Washburn was I was in and out of my mother's room. I couldn't hardly deal with that. But out in the hallway would be your mother and Mrs. Perry and Lionel Roy and that bunch. And they were just, your mother is so delightful to talk to. She's just a wonderful lady, and as is Mrs. DePerry and Lionel too. So I've had some recent contact with her, and
history there.
Oh boy, and there's. If I could get them on a straight story, that'd be fun too. But
Grandma Tiny would be an awesome person.
Tiny Gadot. Maybe we should think about her then, John.
Awesome. Yeah, because I interviewed her last year.
Did you?
And she shared with me her upbringing in Red Cliff and how she met her husband and living here in Bayfield and all that.
Totsy and.
Yeah.
Was it on audio tape or video?
I did video and audio.
Oh, you did? Good. Okay.
That's
And Larry Bauer has that because he's our historic preservation officer. So he has those documents.
good.
What have we been missing?
What's the
that's
difference
pretty much
between the Oneida traditions and the Chippewa traditions? Did you have a little conflict when you were a kid?
No.
Or whether to be
No,
Catholic
because
or
my-
Lutheran Oneida? Or
No, we were
Chippewa?
Catholic and Lutheran. My mother then switched over to Catholic. And so
Okay.
we were raised in Catholic. Yeah. Yeah, we were church people. We went to church every Sunday. I was in a Catholic school. We were raised in a Catholic school.
Were you confirmed Catholic and then?
Yep.
So that you received the sacraments?
Yep. All of us did, yeah.
Okay.
But you didn't go to the Catholic school here.
No.
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 It
I
was.
did
It
not.
wasn't here then.
No.
It wasn't here then.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, actually, I even went one year in the city there to a public school because they only went up to a certain grade, and then we had to transfer to the public school, just
So-
like you guys. What's faced here too.
Yeah, it was 8th grade here.
5th grade there.
Yeah. Where did you go to? What was the name of the Catholic school in
Oh,
Milwaukee?
God, I can't. Holy Trinity.
Holy Trinity. So that's where you got your start then.
Yep.
In the Catholic school, and then went public after that. So.
So yeah, we were very Catholic. We were very brought up into that kind of.
Was your dad?
religion.
Was he a strong Catholic, or was he a traditional Native, or
Both.
a little
Both.
blend of
But
both?
that was taken away from him when he went to school over in Bad River.
Yeah.
He would go there in the winter and then come back here in the summer because his dad needed him.
Did
help
any
raise his
Did any
sisters.
of your relatives ever get a chance to talk to you about having to go to Indian schools like Alec Roy and those kids did? Or
Yeah,
you know
they
anything
were shipped to Bad River when we didn't have our mission school set up.
Yeah.
They had to go to Bad River.
And what was the school there?
That was a Catholic school too.
Catholic school.
St. Mary's, I believe.
St. Mary's, yeah.
But I know, like Alec Roy and some of the old Gurno family, I've been reading the 1916 Bayfield Progresses. It says the Gurno children and Alec Roy and a whole pile of kids just came back from Wapiton, South Dakota, where they were, sent to the schools out
yeah,
there.
there's just tons
That
of
group versus
mission schools. Yes.
Were any of your
I want to
relatives?
think, no. But I want to, no, we were never shipped out of our area. My dad went to Bad River, my aunts went to Bad River. I want to think Gladdy was in Bad River, the DePerrys were in Bad River.
Well, Gladys was in school here.
But I want to think that, I recall, who was it, Grandma Tiny maybe mentioned it, may have mentioned it. And then I want to think, I thought she said she had to go there too, maybe for a year. I'm not quite sure.
Grandma Tiny's a character too.
oh
She's
my
a lot of
God.
fun.
She'll be 87 or 88, I think, in a couple months. But she's just sharp as a whip. She can just tell you everything.
Maybe I'll give her a call. Or
Yeah,
Franny. I'll give Fran a call.
Fran a call and see if she'll open her door
If you
to
want to do
you.
that, John.
Yeah, she would be the person to tap into.
And I'll say that Jeannie Buffalo advised me to call you.
Because right now I sit on a committee with her out in Redcliffe. So, and it's always so good to see her, and she is just sharp, she
Nice little
she
lady.
is, I mean, I'm just impressed that she's on a committee.
I just saw
Still
her.
on a committee.
Yeah.
Participating in the community.
I was up at school last year, and I'm up there all the time. And she was up there one day where they had
She's still working, as a matter of fact, at the Head Start in Redcliffe.
Yeah, she came up there during one day, and I got don't tell me, John, you have to cut this. But she was teaching me how to do beadwork. So me and the kids went going there like, no, she says you got that wrong. You know how you got to beat, you got to do a knot and a loop and all that stuff. And it was a horrible experience for me. And like, all the kids were laughing, and she was having the most fun of her life. But I kind of laid it on heavy too, So I've had a traditional beading class anyway. You should know that.
I think everybody did.
Yeah.
As far as part of Dolores's, her accustoming to, non-natives people too.
Yeah, that's
getting
all.
them into the language and having them participate in culture.
Okay, well, you have a wonderful, wonderful family, I'll tell you. A lot of fun.
What a legacy, yeah.
I want to thank you very, very much for offering us all the information you gave to us today. Just very, very important information that, everybody kind of forget about it today.
Absolutely.
About 30 years from now,
They'll be
hopefully,
looking for that stuff.
hopefully our girls will come in and say, Mom was right, and, and here's her history, and this is living history that we're recording. So, what you're doing here is a big, big service to the area.
Well,
Thank you.
and we don't pat ourselves as parents on the back and saying what a good job we've done, and really look at that, because now I'm opening my eyes and my ears, and I'm really identifying myself with that. Look at my daughters, they've grown to be very wonderful citizens in this world. They've got some of my traits and some of their dad's traits, but, we've raised them to be wonderful people, and so.
I know one cute little story when Sonia was working with us down at the BHA down there. And I talked to Jeannie a little bit later about this, but I always played it up. I said it's really important that, like, your great-great-grandfather was one of the great chiefs of all times, and she came home and laid it on you, and I know that, and you said to her, now just listen, don't think you're a big shot or something like that, because your grandfather was one of the big chiefs, because she came home thinking, like, she's the Queen of Sweden or something. So. But she was only like 16 then, and a beautiful kid too. She had a little bit of sometimes she let you know exactly where she thought at all times.
All the time. Yeah. She just
Beautiful
keeps you
girl.
going.
So okay.
All right, we're done?
All right.
All right.